Chapter 10. Sunday Lunch. On that note, Doreen grabbed her purse, intent on paying for lunch. She locked up the animals, grateful for a chance to get out of the house as she drove to the restaurant. After they were seated, she got a text from Mac. She told him where she was and then walked around the buffet with Nan, filling her plate with food. She hadn't realized what a huge selection of food was here and how cheap it was. Even if she just had one meal a day here, she'd never starve again. Then she mentally calculated what that price would look like on a monthly basis, and winced. Maybe it was still cheaper to learn to cook. But she would get her money's worth today, or die trying. When she sat back down, Nan was eating almost as much food as Doreen was. Concerned, she leaned forward. "Nan, do you get enough food at home?" she asked in a low voice. Nan looked at her in surprise and nodded. "We get lots of food, dear." "I love hearing that you're worried about me." "I don't like being worried about you," Doreen admitted. "I'm afraid you're always giving me money that you need for yourself." "Nonsense," she said. "I was just thinking about how sad it would be to lose a daughter, like Clara did." And that firmly brought the conversation back to the cold case. There has to be a reason why Crystal was singled out. One article one read was about a man who'd been doing odd jobs for a family, and who had stolen the girl from her bedroom. She was found a good many years later, but of course, that's not the same thing as what's happened here. "No, but it doesn't mean it isn't similar," Nan said thoughtfully. "I'd love to think that little Crystal is alive." "I know," Doreen said. "Yet it's got to have been pretty rough on her if she was somebody's captive for such a long time." "And yet in some ways maybe not," Nan said. She took several more bites. "Crystal and Clara didn't look alike," she said abruptly. Doreen, in the act of taking a bite of her chicken wing, slowly lowered it as she chewed. "What do you mean?" "They just didn't. I can't remember the details now though." She frowned, stared at her plate, and then off into the distance. Doreen rushed to make her feel better. "It doesn't matter that you can't remember every detail," she said. "It was 10 years ago." Because she was young and often kids don't look like one parent or the other. "Sure it was," Nan said, but she didn't look terribly convinced. "But you can probably get an image of Crystal online." "I have seen a picture of her," Doreen admitted. "But I haven't pulled one up of her mother. It's a pretty small town. And after the kidnapping, Clara didn't want to move away because she was afraid her daughter would come home looking for her, and she wanted to be here." That pulled at Doreen's heartstrings in a big way. "I can see that," she said, "but it still breaks my heart to hear it." "I know," Nan said. "It's just brutal, isn't it?" "Yes," Doreen said. "Even hearing about people losing their pets makes me feel terrible. If somebody stole Mugs, I don't know what I would do." "Right, same for Goliath and Thaddeus," Nan said. "I wish they would let us bring pets into a restaurant like this." "I know," Doreen said. "I miss them. When I'm gone too long, I find I have to run home so I can cuddle them." "That's the way it's supposed to be," Nan said stoutly. By the time they were done with lunch and Doreen had Nan back to her Rosemore apartment, Doreen was more than grateful to head home herself. As soon as she got in, she sat down in one of the pot chairs and spent time cuddling all 3 of her animals. Even Muggs made it onto her lap, and Goliath was half lying on top of her, with Thaddeus wrapped up in her neck. She stayed like that for over half an hour, just loving that she had a family. Sure, a fur and feathered-bodied family, but they loved her and she loved them. At this very moment, she was damn grateful to have them in her life. She stroked them carefully and gently, holding still as long as she could, but then finally the combined weight of the large Maine Coon cat and her dog was too much. She pushed Muggs off gently so he went down, and then Goliath jumped off. Without realizing it, she dozed off. When she woke up again, she shared the chair with all 3 animals once more. She had to laugh at that. It was already well after 3, and although still tired, she felt better. The events of the last few weeks, especially Penny's attack, had caught up with Doreen. She needed a good night's sleep, but maybe fresh air would help for now. She straightened up, walked into the kitchen to find treats for each of the animals, and then said, "How about we go for a walk?" They all jumped up and down, and Muggs did something she'd never heard before. He opened his mouth and howled. Back at her laptop, she checked how far away Clara's house was, using Google Images to pick out the correct one, if Nan was right. Doreen guessed it looked to be a good 2 miles from here, so it would be a 4-mile walk round trip. She winced at that but filled a bottle of water and said, "Come on, guys. Let's go." And they went out the front door this time and back toward town. "It's really nice out here today," she said to Muggs. He barked a couple times. She followed the creekside path, everybody more than excited to be out and about. "We haven't done enough of this. At least not walks to explore." She laughed at Goliath racing ahead and rolling around on the path while waiting for the others to catch up. Lately their walks had led to Penny's house. Doreen had no clue what would happen to Penny's house now that Penny was in jail. Although if she was released on bail, she needed a place to live, and could still sell it from inside the jail if she didn't get out anytime soon. And Doreen certainly had no desire to keep walking in that direction. Instead, she walked toward where more Chinese food was, not the buffet restaurant but her takeout place, and as they walked past it, Mr. Fongwu was there. He waved a hand and she waved back and smiled. A hairdresser was next door. Doreen didn't know the lady's name because Doreen had yet to take the time to look after her own hair, but everybody held up a hand and greeted her as she went by. In her old hometown, that would never have happened. Everybody would have looked the other way, so you wouldn't make eye contact. But here, everybody was so friendly. By the time she walked past what she figured was the 2-mile mark and came up to the street where Clara was living, Doreen found a ravine and some hilly ground. As she came up to the house where the kidnapping had occurred, she saw the front of the house was on high ground, and it dropped down in the back of the ravine a little bit, so it must have a walkout basement that led to the pool against a retaining wall. So this was Crystal's home. And Clara was currently living across the street. Doreen wondered about that. She understood the reasoning to be close to her daughter, but to live across the street from her ex? No way. Doreen walked along the block itself, and it came to a dead end. She walked back down on Clara's side, studying her house and its proximity to where Crystal's dad lived too. "If I ever divorce with kids caught in the middle," she said, "I'm not sure I'd want to stay on the same block. I guess it would depend on the relationship with my ex." As she walked past, she had to step out of the way of a small red car that pulled up and parked in the driveway. Doreen walked past as the car door slammed shut. Then a woman called out, "Are you Doreen?" Doreen turned, surprised, but she nodded. "I am." The woman smiled, motioned at all the pets around Doreen, and said, "Those really are a dead giveaway, you know." "I guess they are," Doreen said. "But they're family, so I don't even think about it." "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" the lady asked curiously. "I was looking for other places to walk," she said. "The animals and I like to explore a lot." "Do you live around here?" the woman asked. "I don't remember seeing you here before." Doreen decided that good manners only went so far and she said, "No, not really. I live a few miles away. I didn't catch your name, by the way." The woman looked momentarily embarrassed and said, "Sorry, I'm Clara. I'm Clara Dunham." "Oh, hi," Doreen said. She glanced across the road and back at Clara and frowned. Clara nodded. "I see you've heard about my case." "I'm sorry," Doreen said, nodding. "Losing a child has to be completely heartbreaking." "It's the worst," Clara said simply. "It's seriously the worst." There was an awkward moment when neither had anything else to say. Then Doreen turned and said, "It was nice meeting you," and kept on walking. She turned back once, and the woman was no longer outside but had gone into her house. Still, it was puzzling. Who could possibly know Crystal well enough to know where she slept? Surely that limited the suspect pool to friends of the family, workmen, other children's parents. As Doreen thought about that and the friendliness of her new hometown, she found that meant the suspect pool was a very big ocean indeed.